Hey, Startup Nation. Imagine a job where you can work wherever you want, on whatever you want, from wherever you want. Hello to white sand beaches of Thailand or the comfort of your own couch. Oh, and most importantly, you're your own boss. Now, what if I told you that the dream job could become your reality? This is the life of a freelancer, and with some hard work and with the help of Hectic, it can be your life too. Hectic is an all-in-one business management software built specifically for freelancers who are just getting started or looking to take their freelance business to the next level. Hectic is everything a freelancer needs to get started, from an easy-to-use contracts and proposals builder to client management and project tracking to expenses and invoicing that features click-to-play technology that makes it quick and easy for freelancers to get paid. And we all want to get paid, Startup Nation. Built specifically for freelancers, Hectic is everything you need to get started. Visit gethecticapp.com/the startup life now to learn more and start for free. Yep. Adding your first client on the platform will always be free. And if you sign up through gethecticapp.com/the startup life, you'll be supporting me and this podcast, because who couldn't use a little support these days, Startup Nation? Visit gethecticapp.com/the startup life to find everything you need to start or grow your freelancing business today, and put those in-demand skills to good use in the way you've always dreamed of. The link is there in the show notes.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation. So I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, there comes a time where you may think about, the business is going well, and you're like, you know what? Maybe it's time to exit. Maybe it's time to do something else, right? And we have a returning champion, fantastic guest coming back on the show. He is the JBM Enterprises and past founder, CEO of Interactive Solutions, Inc., ISI, a Memphis-based firm that specializes in video conferencing, distance learning, telemedicine, audiovisual sales, and support. And he was Startup Nation, if you remember already, he was on the Inc. 5000 list 7 times in 11 years, which is quite the accomplishment. He is the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, J.B. Myers. Uncle Jay, how's it going, sir?
Great, Dominic. Thanks for having me on the show.
Always. It's always a pleasure. We're so grateful to have you on the show. And so grateful to hear, share your knowledge and insight and stuff like that. And, you've written this amazing book that we're going to get into in Startup Nation. He is back to promote his third book, Rounding Third and Heading for Home, the emotional journey of selling my business and the lessons learned along the way. And that book is out, available today, Startup Nation, they're on a Kindle, but you can go ahead and pre-order that book now. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast. So, but before I get to the book, Uncle Jay, I want to ask you something, because, the last time we talked and we did this, we were in person. We were in the studio together talking, having a good time and stuff like that. But a lot has changed in a year. And so I guess I'm curious, just from your end, what are some things that, with everything going on, 2020, the pandemic and all this other stuff, what are some lessons learned that you kind of take away, for yourself and maybe some of the people that you mentor?
Well, I think that it's been difficult for everybody. I mean, I'm no exception. Life-changing, situation and everything with this pandemic. Dominic, I was thinking about it when I was driving over my office. Think about this interview. It just seemed like the last time I saw you, we were in person, and I think I went to a ball game. I don't know, maybe a month or two after that. That was the last time that things were, quote, normal.
Right.
And, it's a horrible situation. I mean, so much loss of life and everything. But, I think that for your listeners out there, this is a challenge of a lifetime, but it's one that you've got to meet.
Right.
And in our case, my quote business career, when I sold my business and then I was on a contract for about a year, at the time I met you, Dominic, was just getting ready to expire.
Right.
I go into 2020 like everybody did, with optimism and things to look forward to. So I'm at that point semi-retired. I still teaching the class at the University of Memphis, et cetera. But I anticipated filling up my days, my wife and I filling up our days with a lot of travel to see our children in Chicago, Atlanta, and
Right.
various other places. And in fact, we had planned an Alaskan cruise and take the whole family. And then, of course, it all got thrown out the window. And it was challenging. There's no question about it. But I guess on the positive side of things, 2020, although it was just terrible in so many ways, because of when it hit, and it was in March, I just happened to be, Dominic, don't laugh when I say this, I was down watching the Yankees play baseball in Tampa. And I was anticipating being down there for a few weeks to catch the games, and got a house down there and all these other things.
Right.
And instead of 3.5 weeks, my wife and I were down there 3.5 months. So I'm a pretty high energy guy, as you know. And I was like, man, I don't do boredom well at all, but we had to be isolated and everything like everybody else and stay at home. So guess what, Dominic? I had the idea about the third book. I'd already done a few things with it, but boy, I had 3.5 months to really work on it. That's that was the good side of it. I had focused time to put it together.
Right. And this is your third book. And, one thing I want to ask you really quickly before we really dive in, I just thought about this, because when I think about, your first two books, especially Hitting the Curveballs and stuff like that, and Keep Swinging, Startup Nation, the link for those books are there in the show notes as well, if you want to purchase them. Fantastic books, by the way. But one of the things that absolutely. But one of the themes that comes out in both of those books, and even in your book now, Rounding Third, Heading for Home, is that like you're not, unfamiliar with adversity. You know what I mean? And you really, learn those lessons and stuff like that. And I think a lot of times, Startup Nation, that when we do face adversity, we don't think that there's lessons learned. Like you're learning lessons along the way, which can actually, help you along the way when a bigger adversity, maybe like a pandemic or whatever, that some almost nobody saw coming, can kind of prepare you for. So I appreciate you. One thing I've always admired about you is that you've always been transparent and open about that adversity. And I think it really helps others. So I really appreciate that, Uncle Jay.
Appreciate it.
No
worries. I think that you can look at adversity. I never dreamed about some of the stuff that I've been through, Dominic, in my personal and professional life. But, if your listeners out there, I will say, though, that I'm a living, breathing example that adversity strengthens you. It actually does. And there's a whole lot that I haven't seen as a small business owner, and frankly, even from family concerns and things that, that I've had to deal with and overcome obstacles. I mean, I've got, loss of siblings and everything, 2 brothers and a sister that passed away in years gone by. And it's tough. I mean, none of them were that very old and everything, but people out there listening, everybody's got struggles, and you just have to figure out a way to move forward, to press on and believe in your heart that, there's brighter days ahead.
For sure. Thank you for sharing all of that, for sure. But let's talk about the book. And Startup Nation, if you know Jay Myers, you know that he is a big baseball fan. Maybe not a fan of the right team, but I always jab at him with that from time to time. But Rounding Third, Heading for Home, a fantastic book, and it really goes to kind of showing, the ins and outs of running a business, but also thinking about selling that business. Jay, one of the things I really appreciated about the book is that, like, you built at ISI from the ground up, right? 55 employees, $20 million in revenue a year, stuff like that, but like even now after, that you're, beyond that part of your life or whatever, you still speak so glowingly as if you're still running the day-to-day operations. It just goes to show that, like, that's a big part of you. And that's something that never really goes away, even after you sell the company, and you really do a great job in the book, explain that. Kind of talk about that a little bit, because I thought that part was really good.
Well, I appreciate it, Dominic. I mean, I started the business. I certainly wasn't, the be all end all. I mean, I had terrific people on my team, the engineering and support, project managers, back office support. entrepreneurs, small business owners, you can't do it alone. I mean, you have to have teamwork. And through the years, I was fortunate to have hired, and we developed some people that just were the best of the best. Yeah, and even today, after I'm looking back almost 3 years since I've sold the business, I still have a lot of sentiment about what we did and the people that helped us get there. And the thing about it is, and I'll make this statement, Dominic, early on in this interview, for people out there that are potentially considering selling their business, to understand this. People get this idea, you get this big check and you race off to Florida and you kick your legs up in the sand and all that stuff. I've heard that 800 million times. And I'm not saying that some people don't actually do that, but understand this. Selling the business is way, way more than a financial transaction. It is a change of life.
Right.
As an example, here this afternoon, I'm used to, if I'm in my office at ISI and I'm looking out my door, there's probably 3 people knocking on it every hour about something.
Right.
And as I sit here now, I've got a small office in Collierville. The door is closed and there's nobody knocking on it. I'm not saying that's all bad. I'm not saying the other was good, but it is a change of life. And I think that it was very emotional to get to the spot where I made a decision to sell. But gosh, Dominic, since it's happened, I'll be dead honest with you. I've had people call and emailing me saying, dude, you left at just the right time, particularly with this pandemic hitting. I mean, people are slogging it out. And I tell you, man, I mean, I absolutely have all the respect in the world for all the small business and owners out there and entrepreneurs that are having to deal with this and slugging it out. My heart goes out to you, and anything I can do to help any and all of them, I'll do. May feel a little guilty that I'm not in the fight, but on the other side of it, I'm fortunate I was able to protect my family and my family's future by doing what we did in 2018.
Right. Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point, Jay, because like you said, during this past year since we last talked, there are a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners who, some have thrived, some have been able to keep the doors open, but very many of them have not had a great time at it, which is why I'm so glad to have you here on the show. I want to ask you something, because one of the things you point out in the book, I think is very important, because you talked about people, want to sell the business. All right, now it's time to go ahead and kick up the feet and go on beaches for the rest of your life and stuff like that. But one of the things you point out is that it's important to, why it's important to sell the business, when the business is ready, not necessarily when you're ready. Kind of talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind, Jay.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the key takeaways I would hope the readers get from the book is that a business, when it's ready, there's some just intuitive things here, obviously. Business has to be profitable. It has to show year-over-year growth. Things like that are attractive to acquirers. In the case of making mention of the fact that you sell it when it's ready, the business that is, and not necessarily when you're ready, I'm not going to say that I wasn't ready in 2018, but you're not ever really 100% convinced until you go through it.
Right.
And I have to admit that, almost 23 years later of starting and growing and owning a technology business, Dominic, it can wear you out. Technology wears a lot of people out. And I really felt like beyond the financial part of it, which was, the proceeds from the sale were good,
right? Very
good. But that was just part of the puzzle. A big part of it was that I have always cared about my employees and the people that helped me build the business. And I wanted to make sure that I left in a good place, that they could grow their careers, have opportunities that frankly, they wouldn't have had with ISI. So the company that acquired us, big multinational company, that they wanted to live around the world someplace or a lot of different states in the country, they could. And career opportunities that larger companies provide, they could move up, up the ladder in significant ways. So that was a big motivation for me. If you say, well, you sell at the end of the day, why 2018? I wanted the business to grow, and I frankly was a little bit worn out to finance a growth between my wife and I, and putting our house up for collateral 150 times and and all that kind of thing. So it it was growing the business. That was always the overarching strategy and what I wanted to do vis-a-vis the acquisition.
For sure. For sure. Do a quick reset. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to J.B. Myers, author of Rounding Third, Heading for Home, The Emotional Journey of Selling My Business and the Lessons Learned Along the Way. And if you want a copy of that book, Startup Nation, we have that available, that linked in the show notes to purchase that book today. The pre-sale is going on right now. And also the Kindle version is available today. But if you want the physical copy, the pre-sale is available right now. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access. So Jay, if you would just kind of walk me through from the day of like somebody contacting you or you contacting them to sell the business up until your final exit. And quick story. And I don't think I pointed this out last time we talked. The day I called Jay to come on the show the first time, I think you were having the lunch that your send off lunch that day,
right?
Which I felt terrible about the way.
No, you're good. No, it was. Dominic, again, for the listeners out there, I want to make sure I'm very clear about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to point it out in the book. I had no intention of selling the business.
Right.
I wasn't standing on a street corner with a sign around my neck that say ISI is for sale. And nor did I even promote it in any industry events or any of those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the entrepreneur. I'll always be the entrepreneur. And, I made mention of to several people that said something about selling out. I said, I can't work for anybody else again. That's just not going to be me. I can't do it. And in any event, though, through the years, Dominic, getting on the Inc. 500 list and all this stuff, we would get calls.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I point out in the book, I think you may remember, is I have a chapter about don't take your eye off the ball.
Right.
Because it's so easy to get distracted that stuff. And these people are telling you what you want to hear. And we've been watching your company and blah, blah, blah. And, interested in potentially acquiring it. And for any entrepreneur out there that says that they're not flattered by that, give me a break.
Yeah,
they are.
Of course, right.
And we all have to take those calls, but it doesn't mean you have to do anything about it.
Right.
And through the years, got those calls and some overtures. And we actually, I didn't mention this in another interview, but I will this afternoon. We actually had a written offer probably 3 years before, like in 2014 or 15. I'm not sure which year it was.
Interesting.
Legitimate offer, good company. But when I looked at the letter, I showed my wife and everything. It was kind of right before Christmas that year. And I knew what it meant if I sold. And I looked at the number and I'm going like, well, if I'm going to have to turn my life upside down, it has to be life-changing money. And it wasn't. And we declined. And that was a really good thing we did. But in any event, though, the call comes through in June of 2018. And, it was somebody talking about the largest company in our industry, AVI SPL. I can say that because it's public knowledge now.
Right.
And, that normally I wouldn't have paid much attention to it. But when the biggest company in your industry is interested in you, go like, okay, now you kind of have to take a deep breath.
Exactly. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. So the way that they wanted to communicate, their interest and everything was to have a meeting out at one of these trade conferences called InfoComm. That's a big conference. And in this case, this year it was in Las Vegas. And I told them that I wasn't going. I had some previous plans, but my son was going. And then Jordan, and if they could talk to him, he could vet it. And if there's anything to it, we'll get back to you. I really thought, Dominic, that would just be one of those things that my Jordan calling me and saying, Dad, now this is big company, blah, 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 not going to be a good fit. But he was so enthusiastic when he called me and talked about the culture fit and the go-to-market strategy, things beyond just money,
right?
Like alignment. Then I had to pay attention. And so we started setting up a series of video conferences with the folks in Tampa. Jordan was in on those calls, by the way, to kind of be, the right side of my brain thinking and all, right, and vetting and listening and taking notes. And when we ended up kind of getting really pretty serious about things as time progressed, he ended up being a person that ended up retrieving a lot of the information that the folks in Tampa needed to have to kind of pull the deal together, make an offer. And Dominic, I'll tell you, again, for the listeners out there, if you ever are considering this thing, one of the biggest tricks that I had to kind of learn on the fly really is I'm still running a business while actively trying to, at this point, certainly interested in selling it.
Right.
And, it's a process. I'll tell you this. And, a couple of things, just recommendations for people. If you ever do consider this, you need to have a strong attorney on your side who knows how to do M&A transactions, as well as a strong accountant that has M&A experience. Do not ever go into an acquisition process and do it yourself. That's just not a good thing. This is not child's play. This is the real thing.
Right.
And you may have just one time to do this right, and you want to be armed with all the support you can possibly have. In our case, we were really strong on both sides of it. They guided us through the acquisition process. I'll make a side note to tell you that I mentioned that the due diligence process, for people out there that don't know that terminology, that's when the rubber meets the road and they're kind of like trying to pull the contract together to do things. They've already made the offer. It is a bear. I thought my head was going to explode many days coming home. I mean, it was just crazy. And then, Dominic, you know this from the last interview. On top of that, and I'm dealing with all that, I'm also, with my wife, helping to plan my daughter's wedding in Savannah, Georgia.
Right.
And my daughter being my baby girl, and we're very close. And it was like, gosh, I tell you what, I would not recommend that to anybody that take on those two big life-changing events at the same time. But, it worked out, and we made it through it, and it was a successful conclusion.
I heard that. No, I hope you caught that, Startup Nation. Make sure you bring some that really good M&A lawyer and CPA on the team when going through something like that. No, I thought that's very important, because a lot of times, like I said, we always hear these stories of people selling their businesses, but we don't hear those nuts and bolts parts. But I think that's super important for sure. I want to read a passage from the book that really kind of illustrates what you were going through at the time, when you were selling the business. Quote, "However, I had another reason to consider succession planning, one that was hard for me to admit. The pace of change in technology industry was becoming overwhelming. In 2016, after 20 years in the business, I was going through a period of soul searching where I was asking myself some tough questions. Have I lost my touch? Am I burned out? Am I getting too old for this job? And the big one that kept buzzing around in my head was, would the company be better off if I wasn't running it?" End quote. And so again, Startup Nation, it's not always just a transaction when you're talking about selling the business. There's a lot involved here, not just from the having the correct people in place from the lawyer and the CPA, but you have to really be in a great headspace. And you talked about having your daughter's wedding. I bet that like I said, I bet your head felt like about to pop off at any moment, because there was so much going on. But, something you said earlier, I really appreciated, was thinking about the employees. You talked about the sale was just a small part, but the employees was a big part, thinking about making sure they were going to be okay and stuff like that. So that's extremely admirable, Jay. So I appreciate you sharing all of this in the book.
Well, I mean, straight from the heart, Dominic. And I mean, the day I had to disclose the sale of the business, I mean, I had a hard time keeping it together.
Right.
I mean, it's emotional. I mean, it really is. And, I think you may remember that one of the last chapters that I mean, even to this day, I get a lump in my throat thinking about it, is the quote about the title of the chapter, "Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened."
Right. Right.
And, selling the business is, and the one that you create, I mean, I can't talk about selling just any business, one that you built out of
Absolutely.
dirt. It takes on a totally different level of, of the emotion and everything. But, I had to get to a spot where I felt comfortable that what I was doing was right, and right by my family, right by my employees. And I struggled. And that's what I was trying to point out in the book. But the other thing, though, Dominic, I would want to point out to you as well, is that the book is not all about the emotional thing about selling the business. It's also about, for business owners out there, and small business in particular, to look at, you work so hard to build something, what you want to make sure you're doing is building something of value, whether you ever sell it or not.
Right. Right.
You want it to be profitable. You want to run it the right way. You want to be adaptable. So I take a lot of pride in the book. I mean, the whole thing, but I really think that for people out there, I don't want them to consider or not consider the book because, hey, I'm not interested in selling my business, so I really don't have any use for that. There is a lot of, I mentioned, the lessons learned along the way, and
Right.
a bunch of these in the book. Things that like not burning bridges with customers and really in people in your own life. In the case of a business where you have customer relationships and they did you wrong or you did them wrong and you separate, don't forget them. Keep it professional, because we used to call it the boomerang effect at ISI. They got the potential to come back to you. And in our case, they did many times. And we sold millions of dollars as a result of that.
Right.
And then, then other things about knowing your brand, providing customer service, can make or break your business, reinventing your business before it's too late. I mean, some practical blocking and tackling type of insights that we learned. And as you know, the way I'm a storyteller.
Right.
I just was telling stories about all these different things. And with the backdrop to understand when you're hearing about that, it's not just a tip about running the business. By virtue of execution, you are in fact at that point creating more value in your business, because companies that are out there that are interested in buying companies, it's a world of its own. I'll just say in the science and the terminology. And I had to learn so much in that summer and everything to pull it off and all. But here's some basics for people out there and your listeners is that, companies want to buy companies that are profitable, that show year-over-year growth,
Right.
that have recurring revenue. In other words, money that's constantly coming in. And here's just whatever you want to call it, stupid, simple, intuitive. Your company doesn't need to have any ongoing lawsuits.
Right.
I mean, you don't need to be owing the IRS money. You need to have, in our case, we were very fortunate. We had always invested in our financial processes. And so we had audited financials. In fact, one of the people on the acquisition team said they had never seen books any cleaner than ours. And that's important for you to do that. The other little tip I'll just tell you that if folks are out there and they're considering, the potential of selling the business or whatever, understand this. People, companies, whatever, they buy for their reasons, not yours.
Right.
What do I mean by that? We didn't think we were that special per se. We weren't the biggest company out there. But guess what, Dominic? Acquirers look at a lot of things besides all that financial stuff. Guess what? In our case, they were looking at geography.
Right.
They had no offices in the state of Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, et cetera. We were right there in the Mid-South. They always wanted to have an office in Tennessee because they knew there was a lot of things going on in the state. And so that was a big thing. They were paying attention to Tennessee. And when they came in, those are their exact words. And they really wanted to have something set up in the state. So there's a lot of reasons why companies go out looking for other companies to acquire. And if you have some of those things lined up that I mentioned, and if you ever do have the desire to sell, then you're going to be well positioned.
All right, Startup Nation. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. Hey, Startup Nation. I think we can all agree that 2020 was more or less a dumpster fire, right? I mean, come on. On top of surviving a worldwide pandemic, good friends and family of mine lost their jobs, had their hours cut, or went out of business altogether. Yet many of these same people are talented creatives, web developers, photographers, graphic designers, SEO specialists, and writers with solid, marketable, in-demand skills. So I've turned them onto Hectic. Hectic is an all-in-one business management software built specifically for freelancers who are just getting started or looking to take their freelance business to the next level. Hectic is everything a freelancer needs to get started, from an easy-to-use contracts and proposal builder to client management and project tracking to expenses and invoicing that features click-to-play technology that makes it quick and easy for freelancers to get paid. And we all want to get paid, Startup Nation. Built specifically for freelancers, Hectic is everything you need to get started. Visit gethecticapp.com/the startup life now to learn more and start for free. Yep. Adding your first client on the platform will always be free. And if you sign up through gethecticapp.com/the startup life, you'll be supporting me and this podcast, because who couldn't use a little support these days, Startup Nation? Visit gethecticapp.com/the startup life to find everything you need to start or grow your freelancing business today, and put those in-demand skills to good use in the way you've always dreamed of. The link is there in the show notes. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. Customer service, and I imagine like the culture that was that was developed there at ISI, probably led to its success as well. Kind of talk about the customer service piece, because it can definitely, like you talk about in your book, it can make or break a business. And I imagine if anybody were to even think about buying a business, that's something that they would think about as well, is about the culture and how they convert, sales and stuff like that. But talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind, Jay.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Dominic. And by the way, customer service, let me point out just a sort of a sidebar to that is, companies that are interested in acquiring you don't want you to have just one big customer. They want you to have a lot of customers.
That makes sense.
I mean, because you don't want to be beholden, and if something happens, that's very dicey. But in our case, we absolutely hyper focused on customer service. And everybody says that, and it sounds good, and we provide good customer service. Well, in our case, it was literally a lifeline, because we relied on year over year. 90+% of our revenue came from repeat customers. Well, if they don't like what you did for them, they're not going to buy from you again. And in our case, I think with my great team behind me, we provided service that nobody else did. We had the best of the best. What do I mean by that? You read some of the stories of what we did, where guys were literally on the fly driving 4 hours to bail out a customer and staying all night,
right,
with no sleep, to make sure that their conference room was ready for a big event the next day. I mean, who does that anymore? We did it 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Another crazy one was back in the Katrina days, when it wiped out and the whole Gulf Coast, and we're one of the installations we had in a casino. It was horrible, and all that thing. And we didn't think that the project would even occur. It was just going to be shelved or whatever. And we get a call a few months, I don't know, September or something, early October of that year, after Katrina, that they still wanted it to be installed. And the holidays were a big time for them. So what do? We sent a crew down there. And Dominic, I was so proud of these guys. I mean, they were literally working in what would be classified, really looked like more like a war zone. In fact, several of my employees said something about it looked like World War II and Saving Private Ryan or something. I mean, it was horrible. They were working off generators. The closest hotel was 2 hours away. The closest place to get something to eat was an hour and a half away. But they got it done in record time and installed the equipment for the casino, and they were off and running. I mean, again, who does those kind of things? We did that. How many years ago has it been now? 15 years ago.
Right.
And I think that when companies are out there looking at a potential acquisition, they kind of, customer service is important. Repeat customers. Do they have maintenance contracts? But here's the big thing, though, Dominic.
Mm-hmm.
What's their reputation?
Right. Exactly.
What is the brand? And if your brand is that they are crazy good with customer service, that is a good thing.
For sure. And that kind of leads us to, what you're doing now with JBM Enterprises. I know you do public speaking and consulting services and stuff like that. Kind of talk about what you're doing now with JBM Enterprises. And I know you're doing a little bit of teaching, doing some teaching, some mentoring. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but kind of talk about JBM a little bit right now. Yeah,
sure. I mean, it's a hodgepodge. I had grand ideas, obviously, this time last year.
Right,
and it's kind of changed. And some of the speaking that I've normally been doing has been, a lot of that stuff's been shelved for a while. But what I'm trying to do, I've created just this entity to be able to sort of put a lot of different things underneath it. My volunteer work, University of Memphis, teaching a public speaking class. I'm involved with an organization you know a lot about called SCORE.
Absolutely.
And Gary Robinson, those guys over there with the Service Corps of Retired Executives, so I'm mentoring there, mentoring and helping the Cruise Center for Entrepreneurship. And so there's some income coming in from some, not necessarily that obviously that volunteer stuff, but some of the, I write an article for the System Contractor News, which is an industry publication, that they pay me for doing that. And, I'm looking forward to, as with the new book, getting more involved with doing virtual speaking engagements. And I've got several of them planned to where we're going to kind of build up an income. But I'm doing it more as labor of love of these different things, and still doing a lot of board work, a Better Business Bureau and other places. So it just gives me a way to honestly put a label on what I've been doing, and then deal with it from a financial perspective more after the fact than anything else.
For sure. And one of those things that I imagine, JBM Enterprises allows you to do is a lot of mentoring. In the book, you talk about mentoring in a great deal. You actually have one of my good friends, Venke, in the book as well. I'm very proud of what he's doing at Career Crow and stuff like that. Kind of talk about the importance of mentoring, Jay.
Well, I think it goes back to, in my case, Dominic, I mean, I had great mentors.
Absolutely.
I mean, family members, my father, my brother, and then other people that are mentioned in the book, of course, the famous entrepreneur from Memphis, Kemmons Wilson. It was just such an honor to get advice and coaching from him years ago when I first started my business. More currently, I mentioned prominently a well-known Memphis businessman, Mike Bruns, who sold Comtrack trucking company several years ago. These people have all been good to me. And I felt like that, with the sale of the business, I'd already been doing some mentoring to a degree, but I've kind of upped my game.
Right.
And so helping people like Venke, they appreciate the help. We have a good working relationship, and, it gives me a lot of pride to help people and the potential success that we all believe is going to happen. It's fun. I get energized being around people like Venke and folks at the Cruise Center and the University of Memphis, and and I admire them. I mean, that's the other part of it too. When I was Venke's age, 20 something or whatever, gosh, I was too scared to ever open up my own business. But these young people today are so impressive and are doing that, and I want to do my part to help them. And I think that certainly having some technology background and kind of been through the wars, I think I have something to offer. But I'm gratified by it. I mean, I'm hoping they get some value out of it. I believe they have, but boy, it works both ways. I'm getting a heck of a lot of value out of them.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't think about that part. Like when you mentor, is probably just as advantageous for the mentor as it is for the mentee as well. It's like it's definitely a dual street there. For sure. So I appreciate you sharing that. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to JB Myers, author of Rounding Third and Heading for Home. And if you want to purchase that book, you can purchase that book right now for the Kindle edition. And it's also on pre-order right now if you actually want the physical copy of the book. For sure. So, Jay, when you come on the show, I can't let you go without talking a little baseball. Like, I got to talk a little baseball with you, right? So I guess I'm curious about something because, there's a lot of money flying around baseball with contracts. Fernando Tatis just signed a real big deal not too long ago and stuff like that. I guess I'm just curious because it kind of brings up a conversation that I see in message boards and stuff like that. When you see big contracts like that, is that good for baseball? It's all right for baseball. It's just as where we're heading. Kind of, what's your commentary on that a little bit?
Well, I wish I could be more positive about it. I just, I've always, Dominic, thought that my dream job would be the CFO of the New York Yankees for a day.
Right.
Because I would go in there, look at those financials, and I'd start making some cuts, and I would pay them on performance, and I would, I'd level set the price of tickets for the fans. I think one of the problems in baseball, whether you're the Yankee fan or whoever you are and love the game,
right,
I think we're all troubled by the fact that it's become such a corporate game and TV and high price tickets for, let's face it, corporations to entertain customers. Hey, I've done it before here and there. But, what made baseball so popular for so many years was the fact that, a family man could take his wife and his kids out to a game and it wouldn't cost them an arm and a leg.
Right.
And now it's just changed. And the people sitting in the stands versus the people out there in the field, in the old days, there wasn't a massive difference in what each person was getting paid. Now it's absurd. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. And it's troublesome. I'll be honest with you.
Gotcha.
I see some of these guys that are not even playing, that are injured and getting paid more money in a year than most people ever make in a lifetime. And that's just, that's a disturbing trend.
Right.
I'll always love the game, but I'm not sure I like that process of these crazy numbers out there.
Gotcha.
Teams got to do what they got to do. And I'm sure any of your listeners out there are going to go, well, if he's a Yankee fan, they pay more money than anybody. Well, my only comment about that would be check everybody else's payroll. Chicago Cubs, the Red Sox. My team, actually, that I admire more than anything from a business perspective is my adopted hometown down in Tampa.
I knew you were going to say that.
They do a fabulous job with that payroll.
They absolutely do. It's like, it's less about like, hey, who won the AL MVP last year? Yeah, let's sign that guy. It's less about that. And it's more about the work and the grind of scouting and developing players in the farm system and stuff like that. I knew you were going to say that. I promise you I did. For sure.
Well, they do a terrific job. And in fact, I've got a friend that is a AAA coach down there, Jim Morrison, who's helping develop players. And, it's fun. I mean, they play in Tropicana. It's not a brand new ballpark. And I think a lot of people have ideas about getting something new, but boy, I'll tell you what, the product on the field is solid.
Absolutely. We actually made a few years back, we actually made an Instagram post about the Tampa Bay Rays for that very reason, for sure. I want to ask you something, really quickly, because, with everybody doing webinars and Zoom calls, it does seem like, public speaking and doing engagements like these are kind of, still out there a little bit, but even still with being on camera and stuff like that, a lot of people are kind of shy when it comes to public speaking. When you're mentoring and have people that, even when you teach at the University of Memphis, for sure. When you're teaching there, and you're helping with public speaking, what are some of those tips? Because I think a lot of people say, people fear public speaking more than they fear death. So just kind of share some of those tips if you don't mind, Jay.
Well, sure. Well, let me digress at first to answer it, Dominic, and say that I was terrible at it when I was, let's say, Venky's age. I mean, I was terrified, just like everybody else.
Gotcha.
I think I would have rather died than done a lot of those. But then as time went on, I started recognizing that I had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember back, in the 80s, taking a Toastmaster class or was in a club, and I did that for a while, and it helped. But I was a work in process. I will tell you that I turned the corner when I started my own business. So I was older, man. I was almost 40 years old, and it got to the point that, man, this is maybe life and death for my business. If I can't stand in front of people and communicate, and I don't come across confident and whatever, who's going to buy anything from me?
Right.
Who's going to do anything with me? And it really became, something that I knew that I had a problem that I had to address. And so I worked on it. And there's no shortcuts to this stuff. I mean, a lot of it has to do with repetition. A lot of it has to do, I will say, just kind of like in business, preparation.
Right.
And once I locked into that and I kept doing it over and over again, and instead of like in the old days, sort of avoiding doing speaking, I kept volunteering to the point that, and then, once I started connecting, I'd get the feedback and they say, boy, you're good on your feet. Then years later, I'd get invited to these conferences and industry things and all to speak about my books and everything. And I realized I enjoyed it. And I came across, confident, but Dominic, key to it, again, repetition, preparation, whether you want to be, good in anything, public speaking, sports, or what have you.
Right.
I think that, when you do the dress rehearsals, if you will, and I've done a number of those for the most important speeches I've given the last few years. once you start doing that, even when you stand in front of a crowd and everything, it's just the words just kind of roll out, and it's something that you project because you've done it so many times of repetition and practiced and so on that, you come across confident. I'll tell you a quick story. When I got inducted in the Society of Entrepreneurs back in 2018, right before all the other crazy events happened, I was so focused. We had 3 minutes for an acceptance speech. And if you're interested, it's on, I got LinkedIn or whatever, posted on social media. Mm-hmm. But I worked on that and worked on it. I literally dressed up and simulated a podium in my house to rehearse it. I gave the speech to my admin, about 20 different people. Well, when I got up there to do it that night, it was just like second nature. And I got through, and I got a standing ovation.
Right.
And it was, you can get there. And I'm the guy that, again, when I was in my 20s and 30s even, I was shaking like a leaf to do those kind of things. But I think that it's like anything. You got to recognize you have a problem, and then you got to go work on it. And you got to work on it. I would encourage anybody that's out there that's thinking about all this and dealing with it, somehow, some way, get involved with the Toastmasters Club,
right.
because then it puts the discipline in place for you. In the case of University of Memphis, we don't call it Toastmasters. We call it the persuasive presenter. And I'm teaching, the students out there about, the things that have worked for me.
Right. For sure. You bring up an interesting point. We had a past guest on, and he gave a TED talk, and he did exactly what you did, like that preparation. He he had like a red circle in his living room, and he would just practice TED talk. Would you be open to doing a TED talk one day? Is that something you?
I would love it. That's a Super Bowl for people like
Isn't
me.
It, though?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, again, it's kind of like even with TED Talks or anything. Another tip I need to mention is that you need to know your audience.
Absolutely.
You need to know your audience and what you can and, what you want to communicate. The other thing, too, is that my father, who's a really good speech maker, he's been gone a long time, but he used to tell me, he said, always start out with a joke if you can, something to loosen them up. Sometimes maybe you don't have a joke. But what I encourage the students is start out with a question, kind of get them thinking, get you loosened up, and then kind of go into your spill. But you got to break the ice somehow. And I think that whatever you're comfortable with, jokes or posing questions, and knowing your audience, I think those are additional tips that are important.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing all of that. So before I ask the last question, Uncle Jay, as always, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on. And once again, Startup Nation, the book is Rounding Third, Heading for Home, the emotional journey of selling my business and the lessons learned along the way. And that book is available on Kindle today. In order for pre-order, if you want the physical book, the pre-order is available right now. We have that link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast. And also, if you want to connect with JB Myers, we have all his contact information there in the show notes for easy access as well. So, Uncle Jay, as always, we like to leave on a positive note. If you would, good sir, just kind of give us some words of encouragement to take us out for the day.
Yeah, sure. I think that although we're dealing with some extremely difficult times in the pandemic these days, you got to see brighter days ahead for us, and I think they will be there.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff. And that's going to wrap up this session of The Startup Life. Once again, I want to thank JB Myers for coming on the show. Thank you so much, Jay.
Appreciate it, Dominic. Thanks for having me on the show.
No worries. And as always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, The Startup Life. If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.